Test, test.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
What's exciting in the world, anything?
Just Polynesians shooting themselves and each other at funerals, trying to rush IMC,
Right, we want to welcome everyone here. Today, we are actually going to have two business meetings. And this is our first business meeting here on August 18th of 2026. And we welcome everyone who's here and joining us on YouTube. And our first action item is consideration of ordinance number 2026-473, adopting a reduced final tax levy and rate for the 2026-27 fiscal year. And this would be to reduce the adopted property tax increase from 42% to 25%. And this would formally establish the amended final tax levy and rate for the upcoming fiscal year. I think we want to have some discussion on this item.
Mayor, do we want to have Scott present, or are we going to go straight?
Sure, let's have Scott present and then we'll go to discussion. Thank you, Councilmember Holton.
Okay, so I put this together at the end of last week and then formalized the write-up yesterday. The many things have stayed the same, but there are a handful of things that have changed, and so I'll go over mainly the things that change unless you have additional questions. So the meeting last Tuesday on the 11th that we had in the Truth and Tax had a proposed budget of $3.5 million of property tax increase that was 42.02% in calculation. This right up here includes a property tax increase that would be $81,227. $2,081,227. And that equates to a 25% tax increase. And so that's the main revenue difference between the two budget is that right there. Many of the other statements that we had to do that related to the Truth and Tax meeting last week, we don't have to reduplicate because those were required for the Truth and Tax meeting, not for this purpose. So I did not redo some of those items. So as you look down, this area in yellow is kind of highlights all the differences. So from a $3.5 million 42.02 tax increase to a $2,081,227 tax increase, property tax increase, and that is a 25% net increase. So a reduction of $1,418,773 from what was included before. And then also expenditures were reduced, totaling $785,900, $620,000 in IT costs that are required things that we need. Well, most of them are required things that we need to do in there, but are being proposed to be delayed to a future year. And when I say required, they're required by either the FBI or CJIS in order to retain and to be in compliance with their requirements for IT safety and security and that. Some of the rest of that is audio visual in the workroom, this room, and the community room. And then $88,400 in training and employee costs that have been removed from finance and HR. $5,000 removed from employee wellness costs. $102,500 removed from the police. That is a combination of vehicle cameras for $62,500 and training of $40,000. And then building maintenance costs for predominantly this building, but does spill over to the Public Works building as well, of $50,000. And then in the capital projects fund, this is a little bit of a separate note. I omitted getting this in there because when we had the problem with our property tax numbers being inaccurate from the the county assessor and then the state tax commission. I did not put in the debt proceeds, and then also the expense related to the police and public works vehicles. It's nothing that you're, unaware of because we've already approved all of the, aspects of the purchase and the loan in meetings in June. And so it's nothing that, you're unaware of, just it got out of sight, out of mind when we were setting the budget. So it's just adding those things to the budget, which in my mind are more of a technical add because there's not any expense associated with that in the current year's budget. And so if you, as you go down through, you can see
Wait,
areas.
Scott, I have a question.
Sorry, yes.
When you say not in the current year's budget, so fiscal year 27.
Yes, there's no expense related there. Well, there's no cash payments associated with it during that budget. It's just recognizing the revenue that we'll receive from the loan on to buy those vehicles and then recognizing the expense to upfront purchase those from those debt proceeds, but no debt service payments going out until basically about a year from now. It goes out in July of 2027. And so it's more of a technical adjustment in this current year. There's no,
Because it's a lease, because of the terms of the lease?
yeah, because the first payment isn't due until July of 2027. And so that's when the true impacts of this will be felt, you know, in the budget. And so anyhow, like I said, these are all items that we had talked about pretty extensively in June, possibly in the first week of July, but right in that kind of time frame. So it's not new. It's just when we were assembling the budget because of the other things that kind of took a little bit of a backseat, and I didn't catch that we hadn't put this in until a little later. Excuse me. So the items that were changed in here is this item here. So this is the Active Directory and a system for update for 40,000. These two items here that used to be 120,000 and 140,000, which is a disaster recovery site for IT that's required by FBI and CJIS. Again, I mentioned the audio visual system. There's two components of that, 60,000 plus 225,000. A few of these training, clothing, meal items, as well as down in the police area, 40,000 for training, and then 62,500 removal for vehicle cameras and storage for those. And then building maintenance costs were reduced by 50,000. And those are the main items. This is the new, let me make this a little bigger. This is the new tax rate. So instead of the 0.18, I can't read, 0.001802 or 01, I can't remember which it was on the 3.5 million. It would drop to 0.001585 in the tax rate. Again, that's 25% tax increase. So on an $850,000 average home, it would be $148.25 annually, or $12.35 per month. On an $850,000 average commercial property, it would be $269.54 annually and $22.46 per month. Let's see. And then down, here we go. This section here this was really needed for reports prior that were related directly to the truth and tax meeting, not this meeting. So I did not update this and just kind of let it be known on this. We did reduce expenditures by $789,000. So this would be altered by that. I did not take the time to update this particular schedule right here. And then overall in the general fund, the impact of the expenses and revenues and transfers in or out would be that you would end at 3,599,000. So $3.6 million. And that would be 11.7% of the revenues that are included in the budget. And you're kind of always chasing it because if you change revenues, it changes those percentages. So the percentages, you're kind of always chasing your tail on that. But it's, so we'd be down to that. At the end of the year, you would have approximately 982,000 available for appropriation. Again, we've talked about fund balance levels, and sometimes that gets a little critical in terms of timing of when you can purchase things because of when revenues actually arrive throughout the course of the year. And we'd definitely be looking at, some of that kind of timing that we would have to probably implement during this year if we go down to this level. And then that's all for the general fund. And then the capital improvements fund, like I said, the debt proceeds related specifically to the vehicle purchase for police and public works was $3,758,099. And we omitted, I just overlooked that in my haste of putting the budget together up front. And then this is the vehicle purchase expense going with that. There's no, if you will, city money going towards these portions of it because it's the loan and then using those loan proceeds to buy the vehicles. Where it starts to impact the city is in the next fiscal year, which would be July of 2027 when payments are due, when the actual impacts of that on the general fund comes, because then we transfer money from the general fund to the debt service fund to make those payments. So we're still about a year out in terms of the impacts to the general fund on that. Though, and those are the only adjustments that have been made overall in this. None of the other items are in there. It still includes the budget and financial policies. It still includes the get down a little bit further, the fund balance summaries, the individual fund balance summaries showing the different estimates, and I showed the different amounts up here with the $2,081,000 of expense and stuff going down to what amounts to 11.7% of the fund balance at $3,559,000 in the general fund. The other funds really didn't materially change in terms of beginning and ending fund balances. So I didn't review those, but I'm glad to answer any questions that you may have as a result of anything.
Well, I'd like to better understand then, if these payments come due at the very first drop of the next fiscal year after 2027, 26, 27, then what amount will we be in a shortfall on related to reaching the desired level of a percentage of our reserves that we need? So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, should we change and go to this 25% tax increase instead of the 42%, where will we be sitting in a year from now? And will we be looking at a shortfall that would require us double-digit tax increase in a year from now?
So that's really hard to answer because a lot of that is dependent what we do from here going forward. Whether we implement some changes, imminently in the next month or two, moving forward to expense plans. This particular budget utilizes $400,000 of fund balance throughout the course of the year. So it's close to being balanced. 4 million to, or 400,000 to 30 million is not that much in terms of a percentage. Don't want to diminish it and say it's nothing, but in the grand scheme of things, we are below the 15 to 25% target of fund balance where we want to try and be. In terms of any payments and things, a lot of the bond payments are due either at the beginning or end of fiscal years. It's just kind of how the debt service schedules are outlined, and it's nothing new. They've always been due in that time frame, especially the police and public works vehicle. We have always had that payment in July of any given year. So there's a slight change to the amount. It's a little bit higher, and that happens each time we get a new vehicle, because over the course of the 2 years between the new vehicles, the cost of the vehicles does go up. And interest rates are a little high right now, comparatively speaking to where they have been historically in the last, say, 5, 10 years. And so, there's slight increases that you see in those things. But in terms of a roadmap, this budget is a 1-year budget. It is not a 5-year plan to get to any particular thing. That's something that still has to be worked on to get to a point where we want to be in terms of fund balance and that. This is just a snapshot of, what it is going to be for now. And it doesn't take into account really a lot of consideration into monthly payments, and when things, are going to be due and paid for and all that. So.
Okay, so maybe I'm missing something here, but the 3.76 million I show is about 12.5% of 30 million.
Yeah,
So
so the current police loan, police and public works vehicle loan that we paid off was 3.5 million. And we paid that off in July of this year. And I can't remember the exact payment number. It was 770,000-ish, give or take. I don't recall the payment on this one, but let's say it's 820,000, something like that. Goes up a little bit from that, but it's similar to what we have been, and we can't do anything about that. We already entered into, you all approved that deal. That's a loan that we have. We can't change it at this point in time, so there's nothing that we can do on that, moving forward.
Scott, in the
I-
truth of taxation hearing last week, one of that usually comes up, there was some criticism of, why are we using these big police vehicles? But
Mhm.
would you please explain to us and to citizens who question that the analysis you've been through, which is it actually saves us money by doing these guaranteed lease returns, as well as we're moving to hybrids,
Yeah.
which is projected to save money over time.
And I don't know the exact number, but I would say there's about 50 vehicles on that loan between police and public works. About 40 of them, give or take, are hybrid vehicles and hybrid pickup trucks specifically. And that saves us quite a bit of money. I've talked to several in the police department who have said that, yeah, it's a big saver in terms of time, because when they're sitting in their vehicle doing reports, or they're on scene and the vehicle is there with lights going and so on and so forth, it cycles on and off as needed rather than constantly running. And so we have seen some efficiencies in terms of those vehicles because of running those hybrids. The other thing is that we always keep the vehicles under the 36,000 mile, the 3-year 36,000 mile warranty. We're getting close. We're usually turning these vehicles in with 30 to 33,000 miles on them when we turn them in. But we really don't incur much over your standard maintenance, which would be your tires and brakes. Those are about the only things that are not included that we typically cover, or accident type repairs on the vehicles. We don't incur a lot of other repairs outside of that. And so, and if somebody hits us, we go back against them, from an insurance perspective to get them to, reimburse us usually for the costs that we pay on those. If it's our fault, of course, we have to pay for it. So I'm not going to say there's not any expense related to that, but in a general sense, we keep our expense costs quite low. We don't ever have, like, say, an engine that we have to pay for, or a transmission that we have to pay for, or, any of those kind of bigger items in those vehicles. So in that way, it keeps our costs down over other options.
Quick question while we're on this topic, and Matt may be able to help us here. We are getting to the end of some of the life of our heavy equipment, snow plows and such. The cost of those is very significant, and this is one of the big concerns we have for our budget, making sure that we don't run into an issue by not being able to purchase the equipment that will actually work. Can you give the public an idea of the cost of one snowplow? Because
Yeah.
yeah.
So we have a number of snowplows, and we have different sizes of them. Some are big 18-wheelers, well, 10-wheelers really, because it doesn't have a trailer, and some just have a single rear axle, and some are like F-450s, which is a heavier duty pickup truck type of a vehicle usually with a flatbed. But we have a variety of them. Our most expensive plow vehicles, when we bought them 10 years ago, was $210,000 area to maybe $212,000. Those same vehicles, if I remember correctly, are running 580 to 600,000 now. Is that an accurate statement?
The the 10-wheelers are up in that number. We also have the 4x4 bobtails, which are a little more expensive than so 350, 400, up in that, on an average, you could probably say about 400 for overall.
And it's about 10 years the life of those vehicles. So
A
With-
snowplow, yeah, you pretty much, you give them a good beating for sure. A lot of it has to do with, the hoses and the equipment, because it's always banging around. So they do take a hard beating. The cost of maintenance obviously keeps going up. When they're new, we weren't paying anything, and now we're doing a lot. Tires, things of that nature. So they are, and I also want to point out our 1-tons and our 1.5 tons are not on the lease program. Those pieces of equipment we have now were ones we purchased when I started here 10 years ago. So we've been keeping those going for the last 10 years or so. And those are also coming at the end of that life, along with the street sweeper that we probably have in the shop about once a month or so. We just had to put a transmission in it, I believe. I don't recall, but changing components, and it's extremely expensive. They're getting up there. They're working. Don't get me wrong, they're working, but we're we need to keep bumping up our maintenance costs on them to keep them running.
Yeah, our last payment goes out in September of this year for 275,000, and then they're all paid for. But that will get replaced with another cost, and if you look at the percentage of increase, it's a little bit better than 100% increase over that 10-year period on those vehicles. We financed about $2.8 million 10 years ago to buy those vehicles. So if you do the math, you're looking at, upwards of $6 to $7 million if you were to replace them all at once. That you could potentially stagger it out over time to a degree, but yeah, we're looking at some increased
great,
costs.
thank you. That covers my point about that lifespan of those in we are right now. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what I was trying to get to in my line of questioning was I want to do the best we can to project out a year from now. And I realize we don't have the 5-year plan and some of these significant things we plan to do with the citizen committee and some real deep dives. What I want to avoid is that in a year from now, well, it'll be in 9 months from now, that the staff has to once again go into a truth and taxation mode because of the need for a double-digit tax increase, because we're not doing it now. And that's what I'd like you to speak to as best you can. I realize you don't have a crystal ball, but that's very significant in my decision-making. As we all understand, we're here to consider dropping this tax increase down to 25%. But if, again, in a year from now, there's a strong chance that we're going to have another double digit, it doesn't make sense to me to wait and go through this process again because of the burden on the staff and for a number of reasons.
So the burden on staff is the same whether it's 1% or whether it's 42%. We don't have to go through any more or less work, maybe a little more if it's higher because there's more justification that goes with it. But in terms of the requirements by the state or the county or others, it's the same whether it's a 1% tax increase or 42% tax increase. So all of the different filings that we have to have, the ordinances we have to pass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are the same whether it's, 1% or 42%. In terms of the amount, potentially needed next year, that's dependent on a lot of things. And whether or not we decide to start trimming the budget immediately, or whether we want to keep and maintain the service levels that are out there now. And so I have a little harder time answering those questions because really you all kind of give the direction on that. And so until I can answer or understand what, and even the other directors, until we can understand that, it's hard to know what the impacts are going to be from an expense perspective. And then, you go into your revenues and you say, okay, how much revenues is it going to take to maintain that?
Let me just state that a number of the cuts that are made in this budget to make this 25% work will come back around next year. There's several of those upgrades for IT are going to be, we're already 2 to 4 years behind on those of where we should be. So like Scott said, it depends on what decision and which direction the council goes. You're going to be facing the same decision next year. Are we increasing revenues, or are we making cuts to service and the things that we provide or can provide, because you're going to have to trim it. So you'll be facing the same decision, whether or not you do a double-digit tax increase, single digit, or none at all. That's dependent on the next 6 months of conversation if you pass this budget, because we will have to look at either service cuts or increased revenue. So we'll have to make some tough decisions next year as well, because we will be near the bottom of our reserve at that point to where we're operating.
The impact on services is really one of my concerns. I want to next hear from the chief about the impact of the reductions that we just mentioned, that Scott just mentioned, as far as training, the taking away the cameras in the vehicles. I've been doing quite a bit of study. I work with the courts here in Utah, and what those cameras do to the safety, for the safety of our community, is priceless, especially when it comes time for court cases and our officers showing up and having evidence to be able to adjudicate cases that occur. So, Chief, if you'll give us some insights as to the impact of the loss of training, which we should all know is really critically important for our police officers, and then the impact of some of the other things that are listed here.
Well, thank you for that opportunity. It wasn't so long ago in 2020, they surrounded my building and they threw urine at us and rocks and bottles, and they protested in our streets. And two of the things they asked for were transparency and accountability. And it's ironic that those are the things that we are cutting now in police training and accountability and transparency, in having video cameras. We have the body cameras, but we don't have the cars. They are essential in everything from a simple traffic stop that could go wrong, or a citizen believing that they were mistreated or wronged, or that the officer's point of view was different, to an officer-involved critical incident. They provide a sense of accountability to the officers. I found that when we have officers in those situations, they honestly behave better and are more professional than they otherwise would have been outside the scope of the camera. The training issue is, I'm not even sure how to argue that, because that is the most important thing we do. It's everything from use of force to defensive tactics to de-escalation, autism. Everything that we do is training. And the legislature mandates what kind of training we have, how often we do it. We are constantly getting new officers that we have to get spun up and brought to a certain level. The legislature and case law changes yearly, and we have to adapt to that. Those are all things we have to do with training. Training is a perishable skill. We have to, I'm not sure there's anything more important that we do than training of the officers. So those two things are very important to us.
One of the other things that I'm concerned about, and I've looked into this quite a bit, is the necessity, if we do not have enough officers, to have non-contact policing take place in our city. And a lot of big cities do this, where if there's an incident that is, a non-physical incident or something like that, there will be a report that has to be done online by the resident, and there will not be an officer to come visit them. Can you speak to those types of situations? Because I know they're becoming prevalent, and I just really don't want to see our community have to get to that point to where we do not have an officer to respond.
18 years ago, you started your own police department because we were part of the sheriff's office, which is now Unified Police Department. At that time, you contracted for X amount of officers. And they were used other places in the county. They were being moved to White City, to Kearns, to Magna. You didn't have any accountability of the officers. What you said was that we wanted those officers here so that we could pay for them, so we could establish a certain culture and a certain response within our community. And since then, we have held that line and we respond to every call, unlike other communities, not just around the nation, but in this valley. If you lose your golf clubs, or you see a suspicious person, or you are simply feeling depressed and you need someone to talk to, we respond. Other agencies do online reporting, we do not. We go out on every single call because I believe it's important, and I believe you think it's important that we have that interaction with our residents. We respond to every alarm drop. We take reports because that small theft or altercation with your neighbor is important to you. So we don't do that online. Other agencies only respond to crimes in progress or persons crimes, and they'll let you do property crimes online. We could do that. I would not want to be a part of that culture. Thanks.
Nor would I. Thank
Hey, I just want to remind our council that we still have our work and other business meetings after this. This is important that we take this seriously, though. Is there any other further comment?
Well, I mean, are we just final comments?
Yes. Mhm.
Well, I've asked a lot of questions of Scott. I do have something I'd like to add to the record. I do want to praise everyone in the past week who was civilly and respectfully engaged in a dialogue. It took many hours and conversations to wade through the state requirements to find a way to vote today. This is difficult. It's not easy. I'm not going to please everybody. If I had been given an alternative path during the Truth and Taxation hearing last week, I would have put forward a 25% vote then. And I'm glad we have the chance today to consider a compromise increase of 25%. Compromise is something we do not often see in politics today. Despite the paralytic divide that we witness almost every day on social media and the other things around us, compromise is a sign of a healthy democracy. So while we definitely have some challenges ahead, I don't fear what's before us with the budget of a town center or other difficult issues, because I have witnessed what happens when diverse interests and smart people come together. I will vote yes on a 25%, knowing another increase may or may not be necessary next year, just as Scott has explained about what we could do in the interim. Many voices advocated for a minimal increase this year, knowing the risk of another possible increase next year. And I look forward to working with citizens, staff, and electeds to avoid another increase. We will be talking about a long-term budget committee in our work session today, and other processes to improve our planning.
Thank you. And I think.
Mayor, I'm going to add some
Can
comments.
we let Scott sit down, or do we need?
Oh, no, Scott, please.
Yeah, I think we're finished. Thank you, Scott. Okay, yes,
That's-
go ahead.
I appreciate you asking that. We said a lot of comments this last week, so I won't take too long. In my heart, who I am, I believe we're here at the privilege and approval of our residents, and I think that our residents have communicated pretty loudly on this, that at 25%, reducing the rate, trying to do what we can to reduce the rate is something that I'm interested in. I understand that we would have to potentially come back this next year. I'm not afraid of the inconvenience for us having to go through this exercise. I think when you see residents, when they're impacted in their pocketbooks, they get the most involved and engaged, and I think that that's rightly so. I appreciate the discussion around this. This is obviously not an easy thing for everyone on the council to go through, and again, I think we all appreciate everyone in the public and the staff and the varying opinions that we all have up here. So with that, Mayor, if I can, I'm going to make a motion
there anyone else to make comment? Sorry.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
I don't take this in any way lightly. I see it clearly that there was a false sense of prosperity, you could say, with ARPA and rising sales tax revenue when people, let's face it, weren't traveling during COVID. It's kind of understandable that they spent their money online and in ways that drove sales tax revenue. There was deference of maintenance. I go by the adage that, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I see that our city is in need of getting on top of maintenance and keeping well-staffed, keeping training levels at where we need them to be. I have pored over this subject, as have my council colleagues. And what I see is the difference between an average house in our community would pay, if we drop down to 25, it's $12 a month. If we use the 42%, which has been so calculated carefully, that's $20 a month. And while nobody wants to put an extra $8 on a household, I think it is time. I've evaluated out of the 15 cities in Salt Lake County, 10 of them have had tax increases over the last 15 years of between 30 to 170%. Cottonwood Heights in its 21 years has had one tax increase of 14%. So there's many factors, and this is a hard decision. And so as we take this to a vote today, I want my constituents to know that I think we need this tax increase, and I'll be voting my conscience on that.
Okay, thank you. With that, I think we're ready for that motion.
I'm going to make a motion to approve ordinance number 2026-473.
I'll second that.
Okay, and then we will ask for a vote. And Council Member Holton,
Yes.
Council Member Burrell,
No.
Council Member Newell,
No.
and Council Member Highland.
Yes.
And I will vote no. So that finishes that item. And I think with that one, do we need to do the second one at all? No. Okay. So this meeting, I am ready for one other motion.
I'd like to make a motion that I'll get support for. I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
And all in favor? Aye.